just start. Yes, sir.
May I please start with the why? You touched on it briefly about the fact that the Royal Commission has been kept behind closed doors, but can you, I guess, elaborate on why have you decided to release your submissions? It's not a very common thing for submissions to Royal Commissions to be released publicly. Are you basically saying that you've lost faith in that process?
No, we haven't lost faith in the Royal Commission. What we've lost faith in is that all the information will be made public. And that we had hoped the trial would allow for that information to come out. And as a result, with the trial and with the Royal Commission yet pending, this will give the opportunity, if there are other people out there who also were waiting, it will give them opportunities to raise their hand and say, yes, we also had these concerns, or we did this as well. And we think that New Zealand should know what we're doing, but we felt that we needed to hold it, one, to help our community to heal, but also to hold until the trial of the shooter.
And the other aspect was that we want to model the transparency that we would like to see from the government around the Royal Commission report.
Just one quick follow-up question. A lot of this is basically a message to the public sector and a message to the government, but what do you hope New Zealanders who read this document take from it? You say that the reason why is you want it to be public. Why do you want that information to be public?
I would like every New Zealander to put themselves in my place and to put themselves in reading what would have they done if this was happening to their community. Where else would you go? If you need protection, where do you go? And we saw the authorities are there to support us and to protect us. And we sought that, and we clearly weren't being heard and weren't adequately supported. And so every New Zealander needs to understand our story, and then from there we can maybe figure out some solutions.
And also, one of the things that we commonly get, we do a lot of public speaking to audiences, is this expression of shock, or that, oh, we had no idea. We want them to have all the information so they are clear on what it was like, what we did, and what the results were.
And this is happening to New Zealanders. This is happening to New Zealanders. Our children were born here, they're growing up here, and these are New Zealanders that are suffering from, whether it's in school, on the street, or in their jobs. And it's happening around,
Any more questions? Sorry, yes, okay, go ahead.
What happens next, right, is that this report goes to the Governor-General and it's the government responsible for releasing it. They can withhold anything that they want to withhold. Just wondered what your thoughts were on that part of the process and how much that had affected making it public, for example, before the government decides what to release rather than a week after or whatever.
So we were told by the Royal Commission that our submissions are our own and we have full right to release them at any time we wish. So they knew that we were going to release it, they were aware about this press conference. In terms of the government, we understand, and of course you'd have to go back to the Royal Commission, we understand that they will be writing the report in such a way that it should be able to be published in full. Therefore, if anything is withheld, it won't be for reasons of security.
And will you, if you feel like that report that is made public at the end of this doesn't address the breadth of, where do you go next? Do you go back to the Royal Commission and ask they did, or?
The families have an option, and this was another reason why we as IWCNZ actually worked, was the families will have an option. We sought to preserve our evidence, but we also were really seeking to make sure the government preserved theirs. So we did not release our submission until we know that they've already, the commission is writing its report now. The government have said these are our positions, this is our evidence, so they are locked in. And we waited, we pushed to have this, and we pushed to be core participants to make sure that the evidence was retained. We've done that. Now it's for the families to push. If they feel, from based on what we share or what others share or the Royal Commission shares, that they feel that they, they're, what we're saying, that they should have responded, then they can go further. There's also the option of a coroner's inquest. And normally in coroner's inquest, it's more public, but how that would happen, they have to advocate at that point. We preserve the evidence for them. It's their chance to take it forward.
What, if anything, has changed in the way the intelligence agencies engage with you since the attacks? What, if any, changes have you noticed in terms of intelligence and law enforcement attitudes to the sort of concerns that you say you raised before March 15 last year?
So we have chosen not to engage with SIS because of our concerns of conflicts of interest, but we will be engaging with them in the near future. We have engaged with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, with Department of Internal Affairs, with the police. We continue to put our point forward. We've engaged with the Christchurch Call Advisory Network. So regardless of how we felt about the way that we were treated prior to the attacks, we have not sat back and we have not been silent. I think there still needs to be considerable change in the way things are done, absolutely, and I think that our recommendations have not yet been implemented.
I need to clarify one aspect because I was personally approached during the lockdown by SIS via phone asking how our community was doing, which was surprising to me because I hadn't had an outreach for any time from the attacks until then. So that was surprising. But I raised at that time with them a threat that I had raised with the police back in October of last year, and said still they hadn't been able to identify the person. So then they've come back to me regarding that threat. So there has been that personal engagement.
When you say SAS approach you, is there a particular person who tends to communicate? Are you seeing consistency? Is there a certain member of the SIS who liaises with you, or you haven't talked to?
This was a person charged with community engagement for the SIS.
Just coming back to this,
No, I was going to say we have also, prior to the 15th of March last year, regularly engaged with Rebecca Kitteridge and invited her to our conferences and discussed issues with her.
But all engagements are in the report.
Yes.
In the submission, they're identified.
just coming back to the submissions, do you trust the Royal Commission to accurately condense and reflect your concerns that are so, in-depth laid out in your submissions?
I have confidence in the two commissioners, and I have, they've developed a confidence. We did not go into the process with confidence, and they have actually, in my own gain, I have a belief they can get it right, but the amount of information and the depth, we don't know what the other evidence is. So are they going to be able to encompass everything or not is a question. But I think they're sincere, and I think they've made a good effort from what I've seen.
Absolutely, and they will obviously have to condense from what we have written, which is why we wanted to put the full submission into the public sphere.
And just adding to that, the very unusual thing about this Royal Commission is its complete secrecy. Even parts of it that could have been public, such as the whole public sector engagement, has not been. So that was another reason why this organisation wanted its submissions out there.
Do you think part of that was the pending trial?
Yes. I think there are reasons. Also, there's a lot of the evidence would be confidential. We had asked that they do part of it in public, but we don't know their funding and their constraints. We know there are time constraints. So while we're not criticising them for that, it's certainly unusual to have so much secrecy around a Royal Commission.
One of the other very
Sorry, he raised.
Good morning.
I know it'll be in the report, it'll sound like a funny question, but it'll help when you talk about it in words. How upset or angry are you that you weren't listened to?
It's more heartbroken, really, just, we can't put it into words, and even now, sometimes, yeah, also a lot of anger, and there are many days where I feel like I don't know what to do with the rage, I don't know where to put it, and the best thing that we can do is to continue to keep advocating for our community. I think that's what helps me keep saying, is to just keep pushing.
There's a concept in Islam about brotherhood and sisterhood that is higher. You'll hear us refer to each other as brothers and sisters, and there is a very strong teaching in that, and there is research out there that Muslim communities feel a depth with loss because of that concept of brotherhood and sisterhood. And for me, because of having led the government engagement, it was extra painful. It was also extra painful to see one of your national coordinator and her whole family impacted, and it was extra painful for me because I had given the date of the attacks and to get that phone call. So it was devastating on the day, but we had to rise up on that day to support our community, and you see the women doing that still. So it's very painful, but we have to get it right, and we have to put things in order. And so we've held it together to do that. And there are moments, that when you reflect on it, which is when you actually ask that question, that it hits to the depth of your soul.
Can I just add to that? Just explain the connection. If one of the calls that was made constantly by the Race Relations Commissioner and by these women was that the police collect hate crime statistics, they collect data, they collect information about ethnicity of hate crime victims and perpetrators, and that they have a national strategic plan. So that, now if there had been a national strategic plan, SIS and the police would have been talking, for one thing, and they weren't. They didn't know what hate crimes were happening, even ones that were reported. And then, and the whole point was to have all the government talking together in each field, protecting Muslims because they were so vulnerable in so many fields. So when that call came in that we're going to burn a Quran outside the Christchurch, outside the mosque in Hamilton, weeks to 20th February, nearly a month before the thing happened, if there had been a national plan of action, there would have been, everyone would have been tipped off, the community members and the police through the country. So all the community members could have been on higher alert outside their mosque. So for example, someone would have been outside, seen the gunman coming, could have locked the doors. And it's all a whole lot of ifs. We don't know, ifs and surmises, but we can certainly say there is a high likelihood that there would have been far less damage if there had been a national plan of action.
And the other thing with that is, even still today, there isn't that coordination. Because I know the threat that I got in October and when they couldn't figure out who it was, did not get to SIS, or at least the SIS agent I dealt with in lockdown wasn't familiar with the threat. And so there still wasn't that coordination. And as a result, for myself, now when I get threats, and I do, I'm sending them to multiple agencies to make sure bases are covered. And that shouldn't happen. They should have, March 15th, should have told them immediately, we've got to get this sorted, and they haven't gotten it sorted. And it's not just one public service area. If you look at it, corrections has had problems since then. They should be on to it by now, and they had problems with things being released. You have the defense force having somebody is still able to get online who was charged with terrorism back in January for a month. That should have never happened. The public service needed, that jolt of March 15th wasn't enough.
And this will sound quite blunt of me to say, and I apologise, but to sum this up, the current government, the previous government and the public service, would you go as far to say that they all have blood on their hands because you weren't listened to?
We feel there's some culpability there. I mean, it's hard to not feel that way given the evidence that we presented, given the number of engagements we had, the number of meetings, the number of different public servants we spoke to, the number of different ministers. We spoke to the State Services Commissioner. We went right to the top. We spoke to the ministers involved for intelligence and security services.
I think that there was time, there was enough time from 2014 to get this in order, you know, and they didn't. I do give a bit of people getting their feet on the ground with the new, it was a new government at the time, do you know what I mean? So I give them a little bit, and they have been good since the attacks with starting, do you know what I mean? Like starting those conversations, and there are some examples of highlights, but I personally feel that there are some people who are responsible.
Yes, sir. Do you want to take this?
Thanks. I just wondered, broader society, stepping away from government, public agencies for a minute, what if any changes have you noticed among perceptions towards the amount of people in New Zealand from other New Zealanders since March 15th?
There is still a high level of hostility out there, and you know, we got into October last year, and from there the number of violent incidences, the number of abusive interactions and reports that we were regularly getting and passing on to police. So I think generally, like, the outpouring of support after 15th of March was very heartening, and I think generally that there are a lot of people who are interacting with us differently, but there is a certain section of New Zealand society that was emboldened by this attack.
But I'll say that the general public, when I go to the supermarket, there's a warmth that it wasn't there before. The general public, you know, in engaging and talking and not looking the other way, or just having dialogue, it's significantly different from my personal view. However, there is, as Andrew said, an emboldened group of people who feel threatened. They now have the spotlight on them, and they don't like it, and they're saying our rights. And the aspect is what we've learned from the Christchurch terror attacks. If it's only one person who acted, which I'd like to look into that a little bit more, but if there was only one, an insult, you know, so it only takes one person to do it. And so that's where we know that there's more than one person in New Zealand that doesn't like us and doesn't like diversity and doesn't like difference, and as a result, it could happen to any community because of that.
Today in the Royal Commission and the sentencing that's coming up, they're all just chapters in a very long story. In regards to consequences, namely, you know, holding public officials to account for what you see as inadequate protection of the Muslim community, I mean, would you like to see public apologies? I'm thinking particularly of John Key and what he said about jihadi crimes.
Yeah, we have asked for public apologies. I don't think we've named any individuals, but I think there should be an apology from the Crown, first and foremost.
Well, we did say from State Services Commission,
Yeah.
which would be the heads. I think the heads of those agencies should front up and offer an apology. An apology is recognizing the harm, acknowledging that somebody's in pain because of your action. And that's the first step to doing this and to addressing it, is that you have to recognize that you caused harm and that it needs to be repaired. And so those apologies should occur.
And
It's a start.
we also have to recognise that accountability was set aside as soon as the Royal Commission was announced. So there was then not able to be any significant engagement from the public around any accountability issues, because it was all shut down because the Royal Commission was, was holding all of that and not allowing the public into it. So now is the time, once that report is released, that we see some accountability and that we see some meaningful change.
And if the families think, the families will need to consult a lawyer, but if the families think that there should be exemplary damages because people, failed in their job intentionally or grossly negligent, then they will need to push it.
Do you think John Key should apologise publicly now?
He should have apologized back when he did it. He shouldn't have done it. So yes, he should apologize. Rebecca Kittredge apologized for him, not in the sense of, at the time, she apologized to us.
But she didn't apologise publicly.
No.
She apologised to us.
And it's important that it's public and transparent, which is why you're doing this today, right? That the process is transparent.
Absolutely. It is time for all of our government departments to be upfront and be honest about any of their failings. It's time to start hiding, stop hiding, what happened, and to be honest about what they could have done better, and to be public about that.
The idea that we asked them after a year, when we went to the heads of government, we asked them 1 year later, please tell us what you've done in the year. Only 3 agencies presented anything at all, and basically they presented programs they were already running before we had that meeting, and they didn't provide anything that we had asked for.
Just on that, Des.
You said in your media statement, what you sent us, that we maintain the structures of these institutions and the systems and processes used by people in them are discriminatory in design. Are you basically saying that the government and the way it functions at the moment in New Zealand is racist and that is the cause of all these problems?
I'd say that it is discriminatory. It's not just racism. There are other forms of discrimination. And, I've been across the country talking to all sorts of people who have similar experiences of government acting in that space, of doing things for you but not understanding what your need actually is, not taking the time and the trouble to bring people along and work with them and empower them. That is not happening. And it is part of the design. And if you read the report put out by State Services Commission last year about the failings in the public service, it is because of the way they are incentivised. It is because of the way the different agencies are structured. They themselves have recognised that.
But are you basically, and this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but saying that the public sector not only just doesn't try to engage, but is actively discriminating towards minority communities in the way that they try to help people
Yes,
don't help?
I would say that they are actively discriminating because they don't have the capacity, they don't have the skills, they don't want to let go of control. They have very particular views of the world that in effect are imposed on us because they're the ones with the power and the funding.
And this has nothing to do with being personally a nice person. And this is what a lot of these public servants feel, I'm a nice person, I'm well-intentioned. It's not good enough just to be a nice person. Human rights violations happen all the time by nice people. The structures were set up and the people in them were ineffective, inefficient, incompetent, and ignorant. And they need to own that.
And in this, a lot of them, they were touting and they applied for jobs that required experts. They were saying they were experts and they were coming to us to upskill them. They were saying they were experts in countering violent extremism when they had worked at archives and then moved and transferred in. And so it's their obligation to upskill. If they're going to apply for a job that requires an expert, they better be an expert coming in, rather than asking community, volunteers, who have their own lives and their own careers to upskill them. And that's exactly what happened on a regular basis and still today happens.
We'll take 2 more questions. Yes, sir.
This is really just a clarification. You say that Becky Kittredge apologised privately. What was she actually apologising for? How did she frame that apology for public service failure, her
No,
agency?
that was in October of 2016 when she had requested to meet with us, and she was apologetic about the way that the Jihadi Bride incident had played out in the public arena, and that she had been upset with the way that it had played out, and that it had not been her intention for it to be taken that there was these women leaving from New Zealand to be Jihadi brides. So that's what she had apologised for. She had rung us a few days after the attacks last year. She was I think she was the only public servant who took the trouble to ring us each personally and say that she was sorry this had happened.
There were public servants at a lower level, but in the sense of the executives, she was the only one who, do you know what I mean, called and apologized.
Yeah, we'll take one last question. If there's any.
Okay, I'll go. What does success look like for you tomorrow from this story or from next week, for example? Like, if obviously long-term success for you is the reformation of the public sector, but if we talk, I guess, shorter term, what does success from releasing this today look like for you?
I think it is that the public take up and engage with our submission, that we get support for it, that we get support for the Royal Commission's report to be released. We know that the public service legislation bill has been going through the House. I think there needs to be some serious modifications to that and some urgency towards a real reform of the public service.
And I think in recognition that this happened to us, and taking that us as New Zealand, this was an attack on us, and it wasn't an attack on them. And if everybody recognizes it, that it was an attack on all of New Zealand, then that will be a success.
Okay, that is the last question for now. The Islamic Women Council of New Zealand thanks you for coming and sharing our submission with the public. Please help yourself to some tea and coffee and baklava that is served, and may you go in peace. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.